Welcome to Potter Revisited, episode 24. Today we are covering chapter 6 of Chamber of Secrets, Gilderoy Lockhart, or as we like to call it, influencer culture. So despite the great feeling that Ron and Harry had the night before arriving by flying car, today was not a good day for them because they have consequences for their actions.
Shocking. I know. I think it's kind of cool that the sky in the Great Hall matches the sort of mood of the day and Harry's feelings. Like it's a gray, cloudy day in the sky, and Harry's day is going to be rough, so that's funny.
That is interesting. Nice little atmosphere note.
Also, they start this chapter off by listing off the breakfast foods, and I love when they list off these foods, but sometimes there's Britishisms, and I'm like, sorry, what? And today it was kippers. There were kippers, and I'm like, in my mind, I'm like, oh, maybe it's like little small, like fried potatoes, you know, like.
Yeah, I was gonna note you looked up what it was, and I did that a couple years ago, and I always thought reading the books, and even probably really far into adulthood, I always thought they were like some kind of potato.
I was just hoping, I guess, because I like potatoes, but it turns out a kipper is a whole herring, a small oily fish that's been split in a butterfly fashion from tail to head along the dorsal ridge. It's been gutted, salted, or pickled, and cold smoked over smoldering wood chips. So they're having pickled fish for breakfast.
No, but I think about it, like, here usually we get, like, a restaurant would have, like, the English breakfast as, like, an option, and usually it's just, like, fried eggs, toast, sausage, bacon, hash browns, or potatoes.
Yeah, maybe you'll get like a blood pudding or something if they're feeling zesty, but...
Yeah, but never kippers. And I just, like, for the longest time, I just assumed it was some kind of potato or egg thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, and then I remember a few years ago, I looked it up and it was fish, and I was like...
Big old gutted pickled fish.
Who eats fish in the morning? Like, I don't think of that being a British thing.
I mean, like, I know some people, especially in Montreal, people like to have, like, a bagel with cream cheese and, like, salmon, like, slices of salmon on their bagel with cream cheese. I don't know, man. Pickled fish, not my thing.
Not something you think about eating in the morning?
No, I never wake up and think, gee, I could go for some pickled fish.
So they start off their breakfast with some letters coming, and like I mentioned last episode, some parents are sending their kids things they forgot. Like Neville's being sent a package of things he forgot, typical Neville, and Ron gets sent this red letter, which turns out to be a Howler. And I was thinking, like, this is our first experience with Howlers, and Neville knows clearly what it is, and people kind of notice Ron getting it, so everyone's, like, getting ready for a show. And I'm just wondering, like, I feel like these should be more frequent, because I feel like these kids are at boarding school, and kids get in trouble all the time, especially at Hogwarts. So I'm like, shouldn't kids be getting Howlers, like, more often?
So I guess my theory on that is, if it goes to a character that's not prevalent to the plot, which is frankly most of the students at Hogwarts, they probably wouldn't, like Harry wouldn't pay that much attention unless it was particularly hilarious. And even if Harry thought it was hilarious, it doesn't really pertain to the plot. So, like, I'm sure other students get them, but they're not mentioned or relevant to Harry. Also, I'm sure some parents would rather quietly punish their child rather than very, very publicly shame them in front of the entire school. Like, the Malfoys wouldn't publicly yell at Draco. They want him to look perfect. They'd send him a very strongly worded, quiet letter, you know?
I guess the Malfoys wouldn't. It's just like, I just figured all the mischief kids get into, that it should be a daily occurrence at this point.
I feel like sending Howlers to your friends would become like a prank thing people do, you know? Like Fred and George just sending Howlers from Hogwarts to Hogwarts to have random people yelled at and shaking in fear when they see it, thinking it's from their parents.
Yeah, honestly, I am surprised that it hadn't happened at some point.
I'd like to think it did. You know, it's gotta have happened.
Yeah, the Neville also says that he has been sent a Howler before, and he's telling Ron to open it, because if you don't open it, it just explodes and it's worse or something, but...
Yeah.
Like, when do we think Neville got sent to Howler? Because it had to be the previous year.
I mean, it could have been a first year about any of the number of trouble Neville accidentally gets himself into.
Well, we know within the first 2 weeks of school, Neville had quite the...
rough time.
Yeah, quite the issues.
Neville Longbottom, stop breaking yourself. Should we even bother housing you if you're going to spend every night in the hospital wing anyway? That was obviously a terrible Augusta Longbottom impersonation, and I apologize. I think also with Neville-ness, there's a chance he got them before he was away at Hogwarts. Like, he lived with his grandmother, but maybe he visited relatives, and his grandmother sent him yelling notes like, "You forgot your toothbrush!" Or similar things, you know?
Yeah.
Or his grandma went away on vacation and sent him a letter being like, "Don't forget to eat your green beans." If your parents could send you a Howler, what do you think the Howler from your parents would say?
Well, I have to go back to my youth, because I feel like my parents would be, at least my mom would be the type to send a Howler if she was really mad at me. But I feel like I was a pretty good kid, except for in some aspects that I let my grades slip because I just did not care about school. So I think if it was me, it'd probably be like 10th grades when I decided that I didn't care if I failed math because I didn't like math, and I was 16 and dumb. And my parents were so mad at me because, yeah, like you need math to graduate. But at the time I was an angsty 16-year-old, and I just decided, you know what? Who needs math? Not me.
Yeah, I feel like my Howlers would be from my mom, and they'd all just be like reminders for things like, "Don't forget to brush your teeth. Don't forget to floss." Just like really, really angry, "Did you floss today?" Angry, burning red letters.
Yeah, with angry reminders of the chores that I didn't do, that I said I would do. Things like that.
Probably, yeah. I don't think my mom's would be so much angry as like frantic. Like, "How dare you climb that high in a tree? You could die." Or like,
"How dare you ride that horse and fall off it and break your ankle?
Why are you on a racehorse to begin with?"
Your typical teenage shenanigans.
Yeah. Yeah. I find the Howler moment and Neville talking about the one he ignored from his gran is so beautifully done in the film. Like, when I read it now, I perfectly picture the actor's perfect tone. He's like, "Ignored one from my gran once." It's so, like, he overacts it the way you would expect a kid to when saying that thing that happened. Like, it's so beautifully done. The one thing I don't understand about the entire Howler situation is, like, Ron gets it, sees it's red, and realizes what it is. And then he just sits there like, "Oh dear." For me, it's like, I don't particularly want to be publicly shamed in front of the whole school. So I would like take it and like run outside as fast as I can in hopes of it not being so obvious and loud in front of everyone. But he just kind of sits there and is like waiting for it to happen. And I feel like,
I think maybe he was in shock. And it's also the fact that he didn't want to bring attention to himself. So I guess he figured running, it would be more attention.
I mean, it shouts pretty loud. Everyone, they just think, wow, Ron Weasley has to pee really bad.
Because I think later in the series, Neville does get a Howler, and he does run at the hall, but I think you can hear it from, like, the entrance hall. Because I feel like they only have a few seconds from, like, when it's delivered to, like, when you touch it, that it must, like, be, like, a bomb almost for it just, it's, like, triggered. Because I think Harry says it's like smoking and stuff, so you kind of have to open it. And if you don't, it like explodes or something, and it's worse.
Yeah. I feel guilty when Miss Weasley is disappointed in them. I'm like, oh my gosh, I feel so bad. Poor Miss Weasley, poor Mr. Weasley. And like, I didn't even do it, and I wouldn't have done it, but I feel bad when they're getting scolded.
Yeah, I mentioned that, like, as a kid, I remember feeling so bad for Ron and so bad for Harry, because as a kid, like, you like kind of get how Ron is, like, because like you've probably been in trouble with your parents, and like you hate your parents being mad at you, and I feel so like bad for him. But now reading as an adult and just like all these crimes that they committed the last chapter, I'm like, yeah, you idiots. What were you thinking?
He absolutely has it coming, but just the vibes of Miss Weasley, the idea that Miss Weasley is that angry, it just like, I'm like, oh no, I wouldn't want to upset Miss Weasley that much. Like, sign me up for the Cruciatus curse rather than Miss Weasley's disappointment.
Well, we kind of get Harry's guilt because she mentions that Mr. Weasley's facing an inquiry at work, and I don't think when I was a kid I could really understand like the consequences of that, because I don't really know things about work. Like, my parents don't talk about work with me as a kid, and I had no interest in it. But like as a kid, you don't really understand like work and stuff, but now that we're adults that have like actual jobs and stuff, it's like you can see like how serious the consequences could be, especially knowing now that the rules Mr. Weasley was bending for himself, and it just kind of got uncovered by his stupid kid and his friend.
Yeah, yikes in the yard.
And Harry feels guilty, obviously, because he really likes the Weasleys, and this is his first time like being away from the Dursleys, and he really liked being at their house, and he's just kind of like mucked it up for them. Like, obviously they don't blame him.
Yeah, he doesn't want to do anything that will hurt this family that has done nothing but be loving and supportive for him. But teenagers, sometimes you gotta steal a car and commit crimes and stuff just to get to school.
Consequences for their actions, that's like I said.
Oh, youth. Yeah. One of the things I hate that they added in the movie is the Howler congratulating Ginny on getting into Gryffindor. Like, I'm reading the book, and the fact that that isn't in there is, like, relieving to me, because that gives me so much anxiety. Like, that's so embarrassing. Like, Ginny did nothing to deserve to be publicly shamed, and mentioning her at all in the Howler does nothing to make her feel better or happy. Like, it's such a awkward, awful, uncomfortable situation that, like, it stresses me out.
It's more like context for the audience, because in the book we have this part where Ron asks about the sorting and like where her sister was, and McGonagall tells him, oh, she's in Gryffindor. But we don't have that in the movie, so they have to clarify to the audience that, okay, Jenny, Ron's sister, is in Gryffindor as well.
Yeah, but it stresses me out. It stresses me out, so I'm like...
Yeah, the way they do it is kind of like chaotic, but
too
I
much
think
anxiety.
they tried... Yeah, I feel like they made that scene really anxiety-inducing on purpose, I think, in the movies.
Like, I'm like, oh god, no, Miss Weasley, don't do that. That's not cool. I also find, like, I love how Hermione is so mad at Harry and Ron about the stealing a car, crashing it into a tree business. But, like, once she feels that they've been appropriately punished, she goes back to being friends with them. Like, her sense of justice is so strong. Like, she's like, this is wrong. There's a certain amount of scolding they need, amount of suffering they have to have as a direct consequence of their actions. And once they've received that, I'll be fine again. But until that point, I have to take in the responsibility of holding them accountable if no one else will. And she's 12.
Yeah, it's like Hermione's Slytherin tendencies, because she has like a very clear sense of, at least her own sense of justice. Like, she was very disapproving of them, and yeah, she basically was very short with them the whole morning. But once she felt that they were punished, or at least Ron was punished, she's like, you know what? You've been embarrassed enough. Like, I'm okay now. But it's just like not typical 12-year-olds will have that. Like, these are her friends too. Like, she doesn't have any real reason to be mad at them.
Yeah, I can understand maybe being annoyed, seeing them never have to resolve the consequences of their actions. Like, Hermione thinks things through and knows doing this thing is dangerous, I won't do it. And it's probably annoying for her sometimes for them to not think things through, make the wrong choice, and just there be no consequences. Like, even though they're her friends, there's probably a part of her that's like, no, where are the consequences?
Well, there's also the fact that they're her only friends, and they went to school without her, and like they kind of almost abandoned her. Like, what did Hermione do on the train ride to Hogwarts, like, by herself?
I always assumed she kind of, like, hung out with Ginny. I have no reason to think that, but I'm kind of like, I mean, she was probably like, where's Ron? And Ginny was like, I don't know. And Hermione's like, okay, well, you can sit with me. Let me tell you about Hogwarts. I'm very leadership-oriented, and, like, she's like a counselor already, you know?
Camp counselor Hermione.
She's like, hi, I'm your second-year buddy. Let me tell you all about school.
Yeah, well, once Harry and Ron have been punished with the Howler and that all in their ears, they head off to, like, their classes, and their first class is herbology, which we don't get a lot of focus on in the books, but it is nice.
But I love herbology as a, like, classic witchy sort of field of study. Like, nature witches, forest witches working with plants is such a huge part of witch lore in general. I love that they do at least a little bit touch down on herbology, and like, it's actually really cool. Like, I would never say herbology is my favorite subject, certainly not. But like, when you actually think about how neat it is and how much of a variety of plants there are, that at some point they're more magical creature than plant, it's a very interesting field. And like, the fact that they can do so much with the plants they harvest and stuff, it's very exciting and very like classic homage to like classic schools of witchery.
Well, in the way to herbology, we are met with Professor Sprout, obviously, who has put the slings on the Whomping Willow, which is so funny. And I wish we could have gotten that image in the movie, just seeing like this giant tree, just like slings everywhere. But with her is Gilderoy Lockhart, of course, who is basically mansplaining to her how to do her job properly. Which,
yeah,
I was wondering how no professor has snapped at him, because basically all his professors, like, he mansplains to them her job and like how he can do it worse, and the professors know he's full of shit, but they just don't say anything. So I don't know if that's like professional courtesy or respect for Dumbledore, but I just feel like having someone like that, I'm like, I don't know if I could hold my tongue.
I feel like it depends on the teacher. Like, I find that Sprout is sort of more of an, like, she loves what she does and she's very sweet and bubbly, but I feel like she'd rather not have to deal with the unnecessary confrontation, so it's easier to roll her eyes and say, yeah, okay, I'll make sure I'll do that next time, Gilderoy, than to like be like, wow, you're an idiot, stop telling me how to do my job. I feel like Minerva McGonagall is more like a stop being an idiot, don't tell me how to do my job type Miss Sprout is more of a meh.
Yeah, I don't remember him actually ever telling McGonagall anything, which probably is for the best, because she would definitely be the type to be like, I'm not dealing with this. And we know that Snape later on is very much like, he almost tries to catch Lockhart in holes.
Yeah.
Where he's like, he baits him and then tries to get him to like be doing things that he obviously can't do.
I mean, you've got to, in those moments, you've got to like Severus Snape. He's the only teacher who's like, well, I might as well fuck with him.
So it's just interesting how all of the teachers, like, they all know he's full of shit, and they're just like, Dumbledore hired this guy, really? And they all just kind of mess with him in like their own ways.
Yeah. What an idiot. What an idiot.
So this whole, like, I guess we'll go into a bit later, but this whole, like, Gilderoy and Harry conversation, secondhand embarrassment, reading this again, I was like, Jesus Christ, I forgot how awful he was.
I'm cringing, but I also want to punch him so hard. And we'll get into Gilderoy in a bit, but, like, yeah. I want to punch him so hard.
So moving away from Gilderoy and that interaction, we get into a herbology where they're dealing with the mandrakes, and we meet Justin Finch-Fletchley for the first time, which I remember not really understanding this, I guess, just because we're in Canada and, like, I don't know, we don't think about things like this, but he name drops Eton, which I know now was obviously like this really, like, fancy school, like, where, like, the royals go. So obviously Justin's, like, from, like, a wealthy Muggle family, and just like the way he talks, you can see it, and the way he says, like, I've convinced them that it'll be good to have a fully trained wizard in the family, like the way he talks about his family. Obviously they're just kind of playing this so, like, we know why later on why he's afraid of Harry and stuff, but yeah, I didn't really pick up on, like, the real world, like, lessons, because don't really have stuff like that in Canada.
And it's interesting because, like, then we sort of see the upper class money-wise. We have, like, sort of a juxtaposition of, like, Muggle wealthy versus magic wealthy, because we have the Malfoys, which are a classic old money magic family. And clearly, if he's going to Eton, he's intelligent and he's smart, and he probably comes from some type of the aristocracy or those circles.
So obviously he's well connected, but just, like, the opposite way. So he's, like, almost like Malfoy was, but just, like, in the opposite way. Which is interesting to see.
It is.
So they deal with their mandrakes, which is also, like, a really big foreshadowing point, because we see from Hermione that they're used to, like, restore people that have been transfigured or cursed. And we just happen to be learning about these right now at the beginning of the book.
How wonderful and convenient.
And also another thing is, as they go through the classes, they go to Transfiguration next, and we obviously see that Ron's wand is just not working properly. He taped it back together where it had snapped, but obviously it's not going to work. Obviously, it's also Charlie's wand, too, so the fact that it's kind of like...
And it's already a type of wand wood that's particularly loyal to its original owner, so the wand already isn't really working on Ron's side.
Yeah, but now Ron's really having issues with it, and I'm just wondering, like... The profs obviously see that his wand's, like, broken, and I get, like, they probably know the Weasleys can't afford another wand, really. But I just feel like something probably should have been done for this, because it just feels like... It's, like, smoking, and it's, like, doing bad things to him. And it just feels like it's dangerous. Like, we do know it, like, in the next chapter, when he tries to curse someone, it fires back at him. So, obviously, like, he can't do proper magic with it. Like, if they had exams this year, I don't know how he would have done them. Because, obviously, he can't do any kind of real magic with it. So, I just feel like...
Absolutely. And he can't learn the spells in normal classwork, because to me, it's like an essential item to do almost all of your classes at Hogwarts is your wand. And it kind of shocks me that they don't have, like, a school fund for, like, if a kid needs a new wand, because the wand is such an essential part of being a wizard and the way that they teach magic at Hogwarts. Like, it's like putting a kid in an advanced math class and not letting them use their scientific calculator when everyone else is using their scientific calculator. It's like a huge disadvantage.
I just feel like they know it's dangerous, because Snape even says when they do, like, the dueling in pairs that Ron can't duel, like, shouldn't be dueling someone because his wand will backfire. But I'm like, if it's that dangerous, then he probably shouldn't be using it at all. And Ron is...
Yeah, there should be someone who sends his family a letter and says, Ron's...
I feel like if McGonagall's aware of it, she should have, like, said something. Again, it's kind of awkward, because obviously Ron doesn't want to write home about his wand, because he even tells Harry and Hermione this, because he'll get shouted at for, like, breaking it. It's his own fault. So he's just going to deal with it, because that's how he's probably used to that in the family, where something doesn't work. It's like, well, you broke it, so you have to deal with it, because he knows he can't afford another one, right? But, like, honestly, like, I feel like there should be some kind of, like, fund or something, because...
Absolutely. Like, that's an essential thing for him to just be a basic student at Hogwarts. There absolutely should be a fund for that.
But for Ron, he's just sucking up and dealing with it. And we do notice in the next book, I think, that his magic is obviously better than it was here, because he actually has his own wand that chose him, that's like meant for him, compared to Turley's old wand that's broken.
One of the other things I noticed after they finish their transfiguration and Hermione's showing off all her buttons she transfigured from beetles, is that I just really hope she transfigured them back. Like, beetles are living things that have their own little lives going on. It's one thing to pluck them up and turn them into a button for an hour to show your teacher, but, like, I really hope they got what was, like, a temporary transfiguration spell, because...
Yeah, I don't know really how long, like, the lifespan of, like, transfiguration is, but, I mean, I hate bugs, so, I mean, if they want to make beetles into buttons...
I suppose.
Okay. As long as they're not in my house.
Also, this feels a bit unnecessary, but, like, Harry talks about carrying his 7 Gilderoy Lockhart books to Defense Against the Dark Arts, and that's heavy. 7 textbooks?
Yeah, and textbooks, but even, like, that's just, like, a whole Harry Potter set. But, like, even if I have, like, I have the paperback version, then I have, like, my originals, and that's, like, heavy. Like, and they just have, like, these little book bags. Like, I don't know how they were supposed to be carrying those around along with their other textbooks, because they had Transfiguration, and I'm assuming other classes that day, too. So, like, the herbology textbook, the Transfiguration textbook, 7-book set.
And it seems kind of rude to make them carry all of them. Like, it's not like you're going to read all of the textbooks in class. Like, you start with one. Like, tell them we'll be starting our unit with vampires, only bring the vampire book. I hope they have some sort of spell on their book bags, like Hermione's undetectable extension charm or something that, like, makes it easier to carry them. Because otherwise, that's just awful.
I definitely feel like it's, like, Lockhart's just kind of, like, narcissism that he wants to see everyone having all 7 of his books in his class, just so he can, like, see it. So it's just, like, more of him.
He's like, yes, I'm a bestseller now. All I had to do was force everyone to buy my book.
It's like your old professor that made you buy that book.
All of his books.
Well, moving into our Lockhart discussion. So we're going back into this conversation that Gilderoy steals Harry from class to have this conversation with him, which is super cringy, so embarrassing. I feel for Harry. Honestly, the worst.
Really important conversation that Harry totally needs.
Yeah, so Lockhart's whole interpretation is he feels like he gave Harry the taste for fame, and now Harry's just going out and he's doing things for attention.
And, like, first of all, Gilderoy Lockhart refers to Harry as a nobody. Harry Potter, the boy who lived, the boy who literally Muggleborns already know who he is. Like, he's a big friggin' deal. And he's like, you're just a nobody, Harry Potter, but maybe one day. And it's like, excuse me?
Yeah. Well, he's like the typical guy where he's so narcissistic in his, like, his own delusional world where he's being praised for things. And obviously we know he's a smart guy because of how he becomes famous is from, like, basically, like, going after people and taking credit.
Meanwhile, Harry wants no part of it. I generally don't just throw around narcissism, things that are like diagnoses willy-nilly, so I did check in the DSM-5 to confirm that he's definitely a narcissist. And the definition per the DSM-5, or Diagnostic Statistical Manual of Mental Illness 5, is the preoccupation with fantasies of unlimited success, power, brilliance, beauty, or ideal love. A belief that he or she is special and unique and can only be understood by or associated with other special or high-status people or institutions. A need for excessive admiration. And that is pretty much knocking the nail on the head when it comes to Gilderoy Lockhart.
Like, he does note that Harry has some fame, but I think it's also his thing. Well, he doesn't want to be seen as less than Harry. So he's holding, like, his fame over him. He's like, oh, you have some fame for that you-know-who stuff, but honestly, it can't compete to my, like, all my awards, accolades.
He's intimidated by Harry because Harry's actually known for doing something great to defeat evil, and he himself just pretends, so it's probably really intimidating to Lockhart, and he has to, like, sort of come out with this ingraduated self. Nope. This huge sense of self and, like, project himself as so much more confident just because he's so uncomfortable with being around Harry who's actually done something.
I think it's Harry doesn't like what he's known for. Basically, he's just known for living. Well, his parents died, and he wants nothing to do with this, and he tries to correct him, but Lockhart just can't be, like, told, and it just, like, drives Harry insane.
Yeah.
Which we get.
I really just want to slap Gilderoy Lockhart so much. I mean, he's really out here saying that Harry's never done anything as good as him, such as winning the best smile competition. Meanwhile, Harry literally beat Voldemort. Like, He literally compares it to his Best Smile Award, which just makes me so mad. However, here's our thought experiment for the day. Who do you think should win Which Weekly's Most Charming Smile Award? You could name one Harry Potter character and one, like, famous person in the Muggle world or something. I can go first. I would say probably one of the twins for Best Smile in Harry Potter, because in my mind they have a very mischievous, like, smile, and it just seems like fun and treble, you know? So that's what I'd go for in novel. And out of novel, I would go with Natalie Dormer, because she has this beautiful little crooked smile that makes it look like she could murder 7,000 men. And I don't know. It's the greatest smile there is. It's sinister, but also beautiful. And it makes me the most happy.
You really go for, like, really unique smiles. Like a mischievous smile compared to, like, a crooked smile.
Yeah.
Interesting. I can't think of anyone's smiles right now. I guess it's not something I really, like, look for. Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about Hermione's crush on Gilderoy Lockhart, which is a big kind of, like, focal point of this book as well, because we know Hermione is someone who values intelligence and everything that comes along with that. But her crush on Gilderoy is completely opposite of that, because everyone around her is very, like, knowing that Lockhart's full of shit, but she keeps defending him. And one part of me says that it could be because he's a professor and she wants to believe in, like, her professors and she respects them. But sometimes it's just, like, the evidence is so much in front of her that she's just so smitten, like, she can't, like, separate it.
Yeah, I think it's probably just that she thinks he's super hot.
Yeah. Well, she's a 12-year-old girl, so I think we all had.
Yeah, it's hormones over logic. You know what I mean? Like, when you have a crush on someone when you're young.
Yeah. I think we've all had those crushes on, like, stupid boys that we know were, like, full of shit, but you can't, like, help it. It's just, like.
Yeah. Stupid boys, stupid girls. We've all had a stupid crush or two in our day.
Yeah. The funniest thing is that she draws hearts on her schedule around Gilderoy's class, and then Ron and Harry are like, why do you have this? And she's like, no reason. Leave me alone.
Those aren't hearts, they're kidneys.
So I think Hermione's obviously in the crush stage, but Harry and Ron are very much in the girls have cooties stage, because they don't even see Hermione as a girl at this point. So it's just very funny that, like, her first real crush, and we're kind of seeing it through Harry and Ron's eyes, where they just think that she's being an idiot. But she's like, and she desperately tries to hide it from them.
Yeah, poor Hermione.
So another point is we meet Colin Creevey, who is kind of like, sets Gilderoy off more on Harry. But Colin Creevey, who is like a little muggle boy, who's like the super excited little boy. Dad's a milkman, and it's very sweet where he says he wants to take pictures of everything to show his family, because his family were, like, amazed by this, which I get's really sweet.
I think that is sweet.
And so he's asking Harry for a picture, which I get, because people have probably told him, like, oh, Harry Potter's like this cool story, like, and, like, he's just there at the table. But I just find me so weird that he's like, first, can I have your picture? Which I get, it's weird if you don't know the person. But when he explains he wants to send it to his dad, I'm like, oh, that's so sweet. And then he's like, can you sign it? And I'm like, what is this? Like, his dad is going to have no context about, like, any of these people. And, like, I feel like his dad will be fine if he just sends him, like, a few pictures and be like, this is so-and-so from my house. But he's just like, you should sign it.
I mean, I think he probably writes home a lot and is like, I learned about Harry Potter today. He's very famous and he's in my house. And, like, that makes my house the best house. And also, this is me and Harry Potter, who's very famous. Like, I can see it as, like, you're young, you're in a new place, and they're like, this guy's a celebrity. And you're immediately like, yes, absolutely.
Especially if he's, like, told this, because he's hearing it through other people. Obviously, he's met in, like, first year, so he's probably hearing it from, like, pure blood.
Yeah.
People being like, oh, here's the story about Harry Potter, and if they think Harry's really cool with it, and then they're just telling it to Colin, and he's eating everything up. He's just so overexcited about being at Hogwarts.
But also, like, that is sort of just celebrity culture. Like, when you run into a celebrity, the first thing someone says, oh, hey, can I get a picture with you? Like, that's kind of, for better or for worse, that's sort of how it works. So I guess it's just he doesn't actually know Harry, and he doesn't know how people interact with Harry. So all he knows is, like, this guy's basically a celebrity. So he's like, oh, okay, what do you do when you see a celebrity? Well, you get a picture with them and you tell all your friends. And so, like, I guess celebrity culture of it makes sense. It's weird because that's not really how the school treats Harry, or Harry wants to be treated. But I guess,
I think this is the first day of term properly, so he doesn't really know, but I feel like because Harry says yes to him, he puts up with him, and Colin's just this little pest that's just like, he doesn't know where the lines blur, I think it's kind of reminds me a lot of like YouTube culture, but that we grew up with. I think now it's more influencer culture, but when we grew up, YouTubers were like this weird thing that they were kind of celebrities, but they were still very much normal people.
And you felt like you knew your favorite YouTuber.
And the lines were very blurred about like how you could act with them, because they were kind of like told as like they were your friends. But it was because this is like just around the time where they started making money. So it's like they were making some money. So it's like they were kind of your friends, and you can like walk to them up on the street and be like, it's almost like you knew them, but like there's more of a firm line now, but back in the day when it was really new, it was just like really odd.
Yeah, it's a weird in-between between like full-on celebrities and normal people that like you have to understand before you know how to handle it.
Yeah, and Colin's just like not really sure. And Harry, he's too polite to tell him, being like, you need to leave me alone. Colin, this is also the more embarrassing part of the book where Colin asks him to sign the picture, and Malfoy comes out, of course, and he's like, ugh, sign pictures, Potter, you're so annoying. And it's really funny because Colin says he's jealous, and knowing what we know about how Draco complained about Harry to his dad all summer about like how he gets treated and how Draco doesn't get treated like that. And we just know that it's true, and then Draco's just like, no, it's not.
Yeah. No, you're jealous.
And then, of course, Gilderoy Lockhart comes out to make everything worse.
Yeah. Basically.
And he's like, we'll both sign it and we'll take this photo together. And Harry's just wanting to like disapparate on the spot, which I get.
Just die. He's like, Voldemort, can you kill me now, please? I've changed my mind. Come and get me. Voldemort's like, wow, this is great. All I needed was some asshole to embarrass this kid so much.
Going back to Gilderoy's like talk with Harry, where he's basically giving him PR tips, it very much reminds me of just our general influencer culture that we live in these days, where you usually have really big influencers being like, oh, you want to be an influencer? Here's some like tips about how to get started, which obviously don't really work, because I feel like being an influencer is all about like time, like where you are. Yeah, having money, and it's also just luck.
Step 1, be super rich or super pretty.
Think about all of the YouTubers we grew up with that became really big. It was just where they were at the time. You had to be on that platform at that time.
Yeah.
And it was really easy because there wasn't all the competition. Just the same thing with these influencers that got big on Instagram these days. It's like they were on the app at the right time with the right resources, and it's just how it happened. It doesn't, you can't really like, all these PR tips don't really work.
Gilderoy Lockhart would absolutely be an influencer or involved in that culture. I could see it.
Yep, he's just the OG influencer.
I could see him like being one of the ones that sells like expensive online courses on how to be an influencer. And it's like, step 1, know your best angles when taking photos. Like,
and that would be his pyramid scheme. He'd be like, buy my course on how to be like, how to have the best smile. And he'd just be like, have my smile.
Seriously, and he would have so much sponsored posts. You know, Gilderoy Lockhart brought to you by Crest White Strips. Gilderoy Lockhart brought to you by your local seller of pyramid schemes from high school. Hey, girling you in your inbox.
Oh, God.
Like, Gilderoy Lockhart. Actually, now is probably a good time for our first ever ad break. So we'll be back in a minute.
Hey, listeners. That's right. It's me, Gilderoy Lockhart. You may know me for my charming smile, flawless hair, or my many dramatic and heroic adventures. You'll probably never be as heroic as me, or as handsome, but if you use Lockhart's Locks to Heart hair care, you could be a bit closer. That's right, for just 17 sickles a month, you can be slightly closer to my level of hair perfection.
Thank you for the word from our first sponsor. Love it. Highly recommend. So going back to Lockhart's first class, so obviously it's just kind of, everyone's kind of in disbelief of him because he's talking about all these like we're supposed to be knowing him. He's supposed to be cool because of all these cool things he's done, which we know that he didn't do. So he's using his own like charisma and everything to kind of like build himself up. And some of the class is like into it, but some of the other class are kind of like, okay, this guy seems like not the real deal.
Cringy. I feel like in a lot of the cases, some people are distracted by how dazzling he is. Like, he's clearly very charismatic. And they're like, oh, he's so shiny. And like,
well, like confidence does a lot. If someone's very confident, like you have no reason not to believe them.
Absolutely. So I think that's like his confidence is almost all of why people believe what he's saying and assume he's actually a valuable source of information. And then people who see through that or don't care or just aren't sort of are suspicious of that degree of confidence or that much like sparkle are like, wait, what? And I feel like Ron is good at understanding like social situations and like cues slightly better than some of the other kids, maybe because he grew up with so many siblings. So he's kind of like, I don't know, it smells a bit like bullshit.
So obviously, I think the first example of this is he gives a test and it's all questions about his books, which I didn't think it's supposed to be said they had to read them before class. Like Hermione obviously reads them, but I don't think most kids are reading the books before class. But anyway, and it's not things about like the scenarios in which he helped.
How to beat a vampire.
Yeah, like all these scenarios that he did. It's just things about him, like what's his favorite color, what's his greatest ambition, what would he like as a present. And obviously Hermione gets top marks in this, but I just feel like once Harry and Ron are reading this, they're just like, okay, this guy's full of shit. Like this is stupid. Like
quite so full of shit. It's just.
But obviously, yeah, Hermione's just like super into it. She's so flattered, and obviously her hormones have taken over because her common sense is like cannot compute. She cannot put the two things together.
Yeah, I think in Hermione's case, she knows she could learn Defense Against the Dark Arts from a textbook, but she can't stare at a handsome man with a dazzling smile on her textbook. So she's like, I'll just teach myself Defense Against the Dark Arts and enjoy the view while I'm in class. Like, it's fine.
Well, she does change her tune later because when Umbridge is teaching, she's like, I can't learn Defense Against Dark Arts in a textbook. I'm starting in a legal society.
Yeah, but it's harder magic then. This is easy magic. Plus, if Umbridge was hot.
If Umbridge was hot, maybe things would be different. So, after the test, Lockhart decides that he's gonna, surprise them with some danger. So he has a cage full of pixies that he's gonna release into the class, which the kids are not prepared at all. They barely know any magic. And he didn't really give them any instruction. He's just like, deal with them.
He's not only a bad person and a fraud, he's not a good teacher.
Yeah, I just feel like he had assumed that he could handle this and it'd be like this big thing where he could save them and show off like how amazing he is. But obviously it didn't work well because he's not a smart man and he didn't know how to handle it. And instead, he just ran away.
And even if he did know how to handle it, you're not a savior for protecting the kids from the thing you've released on them. You're just an asshole. And he believes his own hype more than everyone else because he knows he hasn't done any of those great spectacular heroics that he writes about. So what in his mind makes him think that I should put these children in danger to save them? What makes you think you can? There's no evidence.
Obviously he's living in a deluded fantasy. He knows deep down he can't do all the things he did, but he still wants to show off and have that superiority and have everyone think he's amazing. So he sets himself up to do something amazing in his eyes. And obviously he falls flat because he doesn't have the skill. And he leaves Harry, Ron, and Hermione to deal with it.
It's just not good teaching. There are people who are not good at particular things, but can teach them well. They're like, listen, I'm not the best at whatever, this and this, but I can talk about it in a way and explain it in a simpler way that makes it easy to understand. He doesn't have that.
Compared to other professors, Dumbledore doesn't do a good job at picking people that are good professors. Usually they're really good in their field, but they can't teach, as we know with Hagrid and Snape sometimes. But in this point, it's just he's just not a good teacher, and they're obviously not going to learn anything this whole year. And it's we know Hagrid says that Dumbledore only hired Gilderoy because he was the only one who applied. No one else would take the job. But it just seems really irresponsible of Dumbledore. Dumbledore has to know that this guy's useless. So I feel at this point, the kids aren't going to learn anything for an entire year.
Yeah, I think Dumbledore had other motives for hiring Lockhart. I think he hired Lockhart primarily because he knew Harry would see how obnoxious Lockhart was, and Harry would learn the importance of being, of having humility, of not letting fame get to his head, because everything Dumbledore does is about Harry, and I feel there is a chance that Harry could have gotten a bit of an ego. I mean, his father had one, and Harry's the chosen one with his father's DNA. So I feel Gilderoy Lockhart was a choice that Dumbledore made specifically to sort of shape the personality of Harry by showing him the worst case scenario of ego.
That seems like a very Dumbledore thing, putting what he wants Harry to learn above everyone else's education.
Yeah, everyone else doesn't need to learn as long as Harry becomes what Dumbledore wants him to be. I also believe I've read somewhere that Dumbledore knew some of the actual wizards and witches that had done some of the feats Lockhart tried to take credit for. And so he knew that if Lockhart taught for a whole year at Hogwarts, sooner or later the fraud would be exposed. So I think he partially wanted Lockhart to suffer and be exposed, but also wanted Harry to be...
At the expense of kids' education. Like, can we imagine, like, the kids...
Again, yeah, school's not for learning. School is for Harry.
Yeah. Can you imagine, like, the kids that are in, like, their 5th year, that it's, like, their owl year, and this is who's teaching them?
Yeah.
Or the kids in their last year who have to take exams as well, and this is who's teaching them.
I mean, they'll probably do well because they'll know exactly what questions he's going to ask, because they're going to be like, what is Gilderoy Lockhart's favorite spell?
Obliviate.
What does Gilderoy Lockhart like to have on his tacos?
Yes, at the end of the class, like, Harry kind of is like, to Hermione, like, how, like, this guy is a total, like, loser, he doesn't know what's going on, and he's like, how can you still, like, believe in him? And Hermione's just like, oh, he's a professor, and she's just kind of, like, grasping at straws. So, like, part of her does know that he obviously isn't that great. But yet Ron actually says that, well, her whole reasoning is, like, you know what, all the work he's done, like he's a really great wizard, like, why wouldn't, like, this was just, like, a thing that went wrong, it happens, and then Ron is, like, things he said he's done, so we kind of already get the idea that Gilderoy is not really what he says he is.
I said it before, but Ron can smell the bullshit.
Yeah.
I mean, there's also probably a small part of Ron that, like, really wants to hate Lockhart because he's so obnoxious, and if what Lockhart did was all false and he didn't do that, you're allowed to hate him, but if he's actually a great hero who saved lives and fought vampires, like, you can't hate him openly so much, so he's kind of like, I hope he's secretly a dick so that I don't have to like him or respect him. Also, we don't really mention it so much, but Neville could have died. Those Cornish pixies could have killed Neville.
Neville could have died so much.
Nobody values Neville. It's kind of sad.
Yeah, Neville's really put for the ringer these first couple books. Like we talked about earlier in this episode, about, like, his first 2 weeks of school.
Yeah. It's kind of like the person Harry becomes is very much because of Dumbledore, and the person Neville becomes is very much despite of Dumbledore, because it's Dumbledore's poor choices to try and mold Harry that always end up getting Neville in trouble.
Yeah, they always end up injuring Neville.
I also think that after that particular class, I know we don't exactly know who was in that Defense Against the Dark Arts lesson, but you got to assume he does a similar lesson with every kids.
Yeah, well, usually they do 2 groups at a time, because we know that they have potions with the Slytherin, so you're assuming, like, they do, like, Gryffindor, Hufflepuff, then Ravenclaw, Slytherin. So Draco's going to have the same teacher.
Either way, I think this particular class is something Draco Malfoy's father should have heard about.
Yeah.
This is the type of thing you write home to your father about. This dumbass teacher released a bunch of Cornish pixies. People could have died. We're not learning anything. And his father on the board could write a strongly worded letter.
I think Draco wouldn't really care about that too much, because we know that Lucius wasn't happy with Malfoy's marks, so maybe he kind of sees through Lockhart, but he's like, you know what, if he has an easy ride through the class, he's not really going to care unless it affects him.
I'd like to think that the Cornish pixies hung Draco from his ears, too.
No, I just feel like he would have used Crabbe and Goyle and, like, escaped. Like, he's fine if it hurts other people, but he always has an escape plan. Because I feel like teachers that he doesn't get along with, like when they have Lupin in the next book, it personally affects him, so he's trying to get him fired. But for things that don't affect him personally, he doesn't care.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Draco is inherently selfish and does only care about himself.
He just wants to coast by.
Oh my gosh, is Draco Malfoy Dumbledore? Have we ever seen them in the same place at the same time?
It's why Draco wanted to kill him. It's like there can only be one.
Only one can live while the other survives or something.
The prophecy that we didn't know is around. The second prophecy. That's a fanfic somewhere.
Draco Dumbledore the whole time. Gasp.
Do you have any closing remarks for this chapter?
Yes, I do. I think kipper sounds disgusting, and I don't want to eat pickled fish for breakfast. I think that I personally appreciate that Severus Snape tries to make Gilderoy Lockhart's life difficult at Hogwarts. I think that is the appropriate and responsible thing to do. And
I'd just like to say that I am happy now as an adult that Harry and Ron get consequences for their actions, as they deserve, because you commit crimes, you do the time. And they committed a lot of crimes.
They did so much crime.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Potter Revisited. We'll be back next time to discuss Chapter 7 of Chamber Secrets, Mudbloods and Murmurs.
Ooh, that's a really good chapter title. I mean, we're going to rename it something funny, but that's a really good chapter title.
We're going to get into some deep topics with wizarding society and racism and all of that, childhood stuff you read in books.
Woot woot. That's it for us this week. Bye, Mom. Love you.
See you next time. Bye.